My sister phoned me at 2 a.m., crying, begging for money for her son, even saying it was my fault if I didn't help. So I finally said 3 words that should have been said years ago. Call your husband. Can you imagine being woken up at 2 a.m. by your own sister, hysterical, demanding nearly $10,000 for her son, and then blaming you if you don't fork it over? That night, something in me snapped. I finally spoke 3 words that shattered our family forever. Call your husband. Yeah, I said it. And what happened next? Well, that's where the real story begins. My name's Marcus. I'm 33, a logistics coordinator for a freight company outside Richmond. Basically, I spend my days making sure things get where they're supposed to go, which is ironic because in my own family, nothing has been going where it was supposed to for about a decade. And it all revolved around my older sister, Michelle. She's 37, has a son named Jalen, who just turned 21. She says she works part-time at a dental office doing billing, but honestly, I stopped tracking years ago. Because the job always changed and the answer always led to why she needed money. To truly understand any of this, you need to know one thing. When I was 9 and Michelle was 13, our dad left. Not with a big dramatic fight or anything. He just stopped coming home. And eventually, our house accepted it, the way a house accepts a door that doesn't quite close right anymore. You just learn to push harder. I remember the first Saturday after it became permanent, a strange word for something nobody announced, but everyone understood. I was on the kitchen floor, doing homework because the table was covered in Michelle's stuff, and I'd learned not to touch her things. She came in, looked at me, didn't say anything for a minute. Then she made 2 peanut butter sandwiches, cut the crusts off mine because she knew I hated them, put it on a plate, set it next to me. Then she sat across from me and ate hers without a plate, just holding it over the linoleum. We sat there on the kitchen floor, eating peanut butter sandwiches in silence, while the house settled around us. That's who she was. That's the Michelle I keep looking for, in the Michelle who calls at 2 a.m., begging for $9,800. I haven't found her in a long, long time. Michelle had Jalen when she was 16. Curtis, Jalen's father, was 17. They tried for a few years, and I'll give them that. But by the time Jalen was 4, Curtis was out. Or so Michelle told us. Curtis left. Curtis didn't care. Curtis was dead to her. She said it so many times it became furniture in the room, something you stopped noticing because it had always been there. When I was 18, I started working full-time, and that's approximately when the phone calls started. Not 2 a.m. calls back then, just normal calls. Michelle needs diapers. Michelle needs her electric bill covered. Michelle needs $200 for Jalen's daycare because the payment was late and they'll charge a fee. The amounts were small, the frequency was steady, and I said yes every single time. Because I remembered that peanut butter sandwich on the kitchen floor, and I truly thought I was helping. My friend Devin, who I've known since high school, he installs HVAC systems and delivers opinions with the same blunt efficiency. He told me once, "Marcus, you have the financial boundaries of a screen door in a hurricane." He wasn't wrong. He also once ate an entire rotisserie chicken in my truck during a lunch break and didn't offer me any. So his judgment, while accurate, is selectively applied. The amounts grew. The calls got more specific. The reasons always involved Jalen, which was the part you could never say no to. Because Jalen was a kid, and kids don't choose their circumstances. I kept seeing myself on that kitchen floor with homework and no table. Let me give you numbers, because the numbers matter. Between 2017 and 2024, I gave Michelle money 14 times that I can verify. $400 for Jalen's school supplies, $1,200 for a car repair, $800 for rent, $3,200 for an apartment deposit, $600 for basketball camp, $2,500 for her root canal, $1,800 for Jalen's laptop, $900 for her phone bill, $4,500 for back taxes, $2,200 for Jalen's car insurance, $1,500 for an opportunity she never specified, another $2,000 for Jalen's tuition deposit, and various small amounts, 50s and hundreds, that I stopped counting. The total from my account to Michelle over 7 years? $43,600. I know that number now because I went back through my bank statements after Curtis called. I sat at my kitchen table at 6 a.m. with a coffee I'd made but hadn't touched. I scrolled through years of transfers, each one with a date and a reason. And the reasons all sounded real at the time. Now they sounded like a script. They were a script, literally. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to 2 a.m. The phone rang. Michelle. I was in bed, the room dark except for my phone screen and the green numbers on the microwave clock in the kitchen, which I can see from my bed because my apartment is small and the bedroom door doesn't close all the way. It's its own metaphor, but I'll leave that alone. I answered. She was crying. Not the slow kind that builds, the kind that's already at full volume when you pick up. As if the crying started before the phone rang, and the ringing was just the crying looking for an audience. Marcus, it's Jalen. He's about to get kicked out. I need $9,800 tonight. Right now. If I don't have it by morning, it's on you, do you understand? It's on you. I sat up. The sheets smelled like laundry detergent. The fan was clicking the way it does when it's on the highest setting. That rhythmic tick I usually find calming, but right then it sounded like a clock. I asked, kicked out of what? His program. His whole future. They want the balance by morning or he's out. I've tried everything. You're the only one who can help. And then it came out. Have you called Curtis? 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then her voice changed. It dropped. The crying went cold and flat, like a drawer closing. Curtis is not Jalen's father. He's not part of this. Don't bring him into this. Then I don't know what to tell you. So that's it. Your nephew's about to lose everything, and you're going to hang up. Call Curtis. She started screaming. I held the phone away from my ear, feeling the sound vibrate in my wrist. I waited. When she paused to breathe, I said very calmly, I'm hanging up now. And I did. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. I looked at the ceiling. The fan clicked. I lay back down. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, my boots still on the wrong feet, the room dark, the phone face down, and the feeling of something ending that I didn't have words for yet. Within 40 minutes, the phone started buzzing again. Not Michelle. My mother, Lorraine. Then Aunt Pauline. Then Michelle again. Then 2 numbers I didn't recognize. I watched the screen light up and go dark. Light up and go dark, like a small, mechanical heartbeat on the nightstand. By 5 a.m., I had 23 missed calls and 4 voicemails. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to them. Voicemail 1, Michelle crying. I can't believe you. My own brother. Your own nephew. If something happens to him, I will never, ever forgive you. Voicemail 2, my mother Lorraine. Her voice tight and careful, the way it gets when she's chosen a side but doesn't want to sound like she has. Marcus, honey, please call your sister. She's a mess. This isn't the time to make a point. Just help, please. Voicemail 3, Aunt Pauline. And this one, I remember word for word, because it was the one that made me put on my boots. This is why nobody calls you Marcus. You have the money. You always have the money. And you'd rather let a child suffer than be a man about it. Shame on you. I stood up. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, but from that particular kind of adrenaline that comes from being told you're the villain in a story someone else wrote. I made coffee. I stood in the kitchen, holding the mug, not drinking it, listening to the refrigerator hum, waiting for the 4th voicemail, because I'd seen the unknown number, and something about it felt different. Voicemail for Curtis. That brings us back to 5:47 a.m. Curtis talked for 22 minutes on that first call. I know, because I checked the call log afterward. He spoke slowly, the way people speak when they've been waiting a long time to say something and they want to get it right. He paused between sentences, like he was checking each one for accuracy before releasing it. I could hear a TV in the background, turned low. At one point, I heard a door close softly, which I think was Jalen in another room, giving his father space to make this call. Here's what he told me. Curtis never left Jalen. Michelle pushed him out when Jalen was 4. Told him if he tried to contact Jalen directly, she'd file a restraining order. Curtis was 21 at the time, working at a tire shop, making $11.50 an hour. No lawyer, no money for one. No understanding that a threat isn't the same thing as a court order. He believed her. He backed off. He spent 5 years thinking he had no legal right to see his own son. He never actually checked. There was never a restraining order, never even a filing, never a piece of paper with a judge's signature. She bluffed him out of his son's life with a sentence she never had to prove. And the bluff held for years because Curtis was too broke and too scared to call it. But Curtis didn't disappear. He started sending Michelle $350 a month. Voluntary, not court-ordered. Because she told him if he stopped, she'd tell Jalen he'd abandon them completely. So Curtis paid. Every month. Bank transfers he screenshotted and saved in a folder on his desktop. He has receipts for every single one. $350 times 84 months. That's $29,400 sent to the mother of his child for his child. Jalen never saw a dollar. Not one. Curtis was paying rent on a relationship he wasn't allowed to have. And the money was going into a system that was using his son's name to extract from everyone else, too. And 3 years ago, Curtis tried to warn me. He sent me a Facebook message explaining that Michelle was intercepting money and lying about Jalen's needs. He laid it all out. Dates, amounts, patterns. He spent an hour writing it. He said he rewrote the first paragraph 4 times because he didn't want to sound bitter. He wanted to sound clear. I never saw it. It went to message requests, that grayed out folder that Facebook puts messages from non-friends into. The folder that exists specifically so you never have to read anything uncomfortable. I don't check message requests. Nobody checks message requests. Curtis waited for a reply for 2 weeks, then a month. Then he stopped waiting. He assumed I didn't care. I assumed he was absent. 2 men, wrong about each other for 3 years because neither one clicked on a folder. And one of them couldn't afford the $200 an hour it would have cost to have a lawyer click it for him. I sat at my kitchen table processing this, and the coffee was cold. I hadn't taken a single sip. The sun was coming up through the blinds in strips across the floor. I thought about Michelle making peanut butter sandwiches on a kitchen floor 24 years ago. And I thought about the same woman running a spreadsheet on her own family. And those 2 people didn't fit in the same body. But they lived there anyway, because there was a spreadsheet. For months ago, Jalen, now 21 years old, was looking for his birth certificate because Michelle told him they were about to be evicted, and he needed to start applying for housing. The eviction was real, but while digging through Michelle's closet, Jalen found a folder. Inside that folder was a spreadsheet, printed, updated by hand, with pen corrections in the margins. The spreadsheet tracked every family member Michelle had asked for money. Names down the left side, dates across the top, amounts in each cell, color-coded, green for paid, yellow for pending, red for declined, retry in 3 months. My column had notes. Response to Jalen angled best between October and December. Holiday guilt. She was profiling her own family, but the spreadsheet was just the cash. There was a second page, non-cash favors. Cosigns, items borrowed and never returned. A car I lent her in 2019 for 2 weeks that she sold. A security deposit I covered. The laptop I bought for Jalen that was pawned within a month. Pawn shop records. Existed. Michelle's ID on every transaction. She'd been converting gifts into cash. My grandmother's gold chain. A set of tools I gave Jalen for his 18th birthday. All pawned, all under Michelle's name. The real total extracted from me alone, cash and non-cash, was over $71,000 in 7 years. But the thing that made Jalen leave wasn't the spreadsheet. It was what he found underneath it. A stack of unopened letters from Curtis. Birthday cards, Christmas cards. One still had a $100 bill inside, the envelope sealed. Some of them going back 5 years. Curtis had been writing his son every year. Jalen never got a single one. Michelle kept them in a folder in her closet, like evidence of a crime she committed against her own child's heart. Jalen held a sealed birthday card from his father, and something happened inside him that he told me about later, in a letter, 3 handwritten pages. And the sentence that stays with me is this: I thought you stopped coming around because of me. She let me believe that. He packed a bag at 3 a.m. He went to Curtis, a man he hadn't spoken to in years, because he had literally nobody else. And Curtis opened the door. No questions, no conditions, just opened it. In 4 months, Jalen got his HVAC certification. He works part-time at a supply company, making $17 an hour. He's studying for his journeyman exam, using a textbook he bought used for $34, with a highlighter that's running out of ink. He pays Curtis $300 a month in rent. Curtis didn't ask for it. Curtis tried to refuse it. Jalen insisted. He said, I need to pay for where I live. That's how it works when it's real. He was talking about more than rent. And for 2 years before he left, while still living under Michelle's roof, eating food bought with money she extracted from other people, sleeping in a room in a house she was losing, Jalen had been building his own file. Quietly, carefully, the way you build something when the person you're building it about is sleeping 20 feet away and you can hear her phone conversations through the wall. Screenshots of text messages where Michelle told different family members different stories about the same emergency. Photographs of pawn shop receipts she left in her purse. A handwritten journal documenting every lie he caught her in. Dated, described, with the specific words she used, written in quotation marks. Because he understood, even at 19, that the exact words matter. He started the journal at 19, after she told him his college fund never existed. There had been a college fund. My grandmother and I had set it up when Jalen was 12. $6,200. Michelle drained it in 2021. But the way she said never existed, with a little shrug like the question was silly. Something about it sounded practiced. Jalen didn't challenge her. He went to his room and wrote the date in a composition notebook. Underneath it, he wrote, she lied about the college fund. I could hear it. That was the first entry. There are over 200 pages after it. The kid Michelle kept positioning as helpless was the most meticulous person in the family. After Curtis's call, I spent 3 days in a state I can only describe as very still. I went to work. I drove the same route. I parked in the same spot. I ate lunch at my desk and couldn't tell you what any of it tasted like. At night, I sat on my couch, and the TV was on, but I was watching the wall behind it, running the numbers, running the years, running every phone call from Michelle through a filter I hadn't known existed until Curtis handed it to me at 5:47 in the morning. 3 days of that. 3 days of looking at my bank app, scrolling through transactions with Michelle's name on them. Each one felt like reading a receipt from a store I thought was a charity, but was actually a business. Devin came over on the second night. 6-pack of something cheap and a bag of gas station peanuts. He didn't say much, which for Devin is an act of extraordinary discipline, because the man has opinions about ceiling fans and expresses them unprompted. He sat on my couch, drank, and shelled peanuts into a bowl I'd set out for chips. At one point, he said, "You have the face of a man who's doing math he doesn't want to finish." I told him everything. He listened. He ate peanuts. Then he said, $71,000? I said yes. He took a long pull of his beer, looked at the ceiling and said, for $71,000, she could have at least pawned something I wouldn't notice. He was making a joke, I think. With Devin, you can't always tell because the man delivers humor and fury with the same flat voice, and sometimes they're the same thing. I called Curtis back on the third day. I told him I wanted to see the file. I wanted to see the spreadsheet. I wanted to see Jalen. Part of me was afraid to see Jalen. Part of me was afraid he'd look at me the way you look at someone who should have known and didn't. And a small part of me, the part we don't talk about, was afraid that seeing Jalen would mean accepting that I'd spent 7 years funding the cage he grew up in. We met at a diner off Route 1. Vinyl booths, coffee in those heavy ceramic mugs with the brown ring stain that never comes out. The kind of place where the waitress calls everyone hon and refills your cup without asking. Jalen was taller than I remembered and thinner. He had a handshake that was too firm, yet he was wearing a work polo from the supply company with a name tag that said J. His hands had that dry roughness that comes from handling copper fittings all day. Curtis sat next to him, quiet, present, solid in the booth. The kind of presence that only matters when you know how long the absence was. Jalen showed me the journal. I didn't read it there. He gave me a copy, 200+ pages, photocopied at a FedEx. I read it at home, in my truck in the driveway, because I started reading in the truck and couldn't stop. By the time I looked up, the sun was behind the trees, and I'd been sitting there for 40 minutes, the engine off, the cab cold, my hands stiff on the pages, and I hadn't reached for the key. I sent the spreadsheet to every person named on it. No cover letter, no explanation, just the document. 14 envelopes. Same Tuesday. I stood at the post office counter, and the woman behind the glass asked if I needed tracking on any of them. I said no. Some deliveries you don't need to track. You just need to send. My phone rang 11 times that day. Each call was a different family member, processing their own column. Some were quiet, some were angry. My cousin Terrence, who's on the spreadsheet for $2,400 across 3 emergencies, called and said one word. Wow. Then he hung up. That was the whole call. Michelle found out Jalen was living with Curtis when she drove to his campus, and the resident advisor said he'd moved out months ago. She called me, not crying this time, screaming. The kind of screaming that doesn't have spaces between the words. You turned my son against me. You and Curtis. You poisoned him. I waited for her to breathe. Then I said he left on his own. He found the folder. The word folder stopped her. 3 seconds of dead air. Total silence. Not the silence of someone thinking. The silence of someone being caught. She knew exactly which folder. She knew exactly what was in it. And in that 3 seconds, she calculated that I knew too. Then she hung up. She doubled down. Within 48 hours, she called me selfish to every family member who would listen. She called Curtis a deadbeat who was brainwashing Jalen. She told Jalen he'd come crawling back when Curtis gets bored of playing dad. She started a group text to extended family, calling me a manipulator who was poisoning Jalen against his own mother for attention. Every text screenshotted by someone and forwarded to me. She was building a case against herself with every message she sent. But she couldn't stop because stopping would mean sitting in silence with what she'd done. And Michelle has never been able to sit in silence with anything. Then she tried something new. She told the family I owed her $5,000 from years ago. She said she'd lent it to me in 2020, and I'd never paid it back. She had a Venmo screenshot to prove it. She sent it to everyone. The screenshot showed a $5,000 transfer from her account to mine, dated March 2020, with a note that said, "Loan for Marcus. He'll pay back." I pulled my actual bank records. Every statement from 2020. Every transaction. No such transfer ever existed. Not from Venmo. Not from any source. The $5,000 never happened. Devin, who I'd shown the screenshot to, looked at it for about 30 seconds and said, "The date font is wrong. She used Calibri. Venmo uses Helvetica. Nobody uses Calibri for fraud. Have some self-respect." I don't think he was joking. With Devin, the line between forensic analysis and personal insult is razor thin, and he walks it daily. I sent my bank records to the same family group chat Michelle had been using to campaign against me. No commentary, just the statements. The month she claimed the transfer happened. Clean, empty of her money. The fake screenshot sitting next to the real records was the last wall. Every person who was still giving Michelle the benefit of the doubt watched her manufacture evidence in real time. She didn't just lie about money. She fabricated proof. And once you fabricate proof, every previous claim becomes suspect. Every emergency, every dollar amount, every tear. Aunt Pauline, the woman who'd called me heartless at 2 a.m., the woman who told me, "This is why nobody calls you," posted in the family group chat 3 days after the fake screenshot was exposed. She wrote, "I've given Michelle $18,000 in 4 years. I'm behind on my own car payments because of it. I'm done. I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have asked questions before I asked you to write checks." Pauline called me that night. She wasn't angry at me. She was angry at herself. She said she'd been giving Michelle money every time Michelle called with an emergency about Jalen, the same way I had. The same urgency, the same guilt, The same phrase, "If you don't help, it's on you." Pauline had never added it up. She treated each request as a one-time thing. When she finally pulled her bank records and added the column, she sat at her kitchen table and put her face in her hands and stayed there for a while. She told me she was 3 months behind on her car payment, that her credit score had dropped 80 points, that she'd skipped her own dental work twice because the money wasn't there. The money was with Michelle. Michelle, who on the night she called me crying about $9,800, had $14,300 sitting in a second bank account nobody knew about. That number came from Jalen. While living with Curtis, he'd helped pull some of Michelle's financial records for custody paperwork. Records she'd left accessible on a shared family iCloud account she'd forgotten to log out of. The second bank account was at a credit union. It had $14,300 in it the night Michelle called me at 2 a.m. She had the money. She had almost $5,000 more than she was asking me for. She just preferred to spend mine. Part of me wanted to be angry about that number. Part of me wanted it to be the thing that finally made everything clean and simple. Just rage. Just betrayal. Just black and white. But a small part of me, the part that remembers peanut butter sandwiches on a kitchen floor, kept thinking, she had the money and she still called. Which means the calls were never really about money. They were about something else. Control, maybe, or connection, or the only way she knew how to make sure people picked up the phone. I don't know. I'm not her therapist, but that thought follows me around like a dog I didn't adopt. And then my mother called. Not Michelle. My mother, Lorraine. She didn't apologize immediately. She breathed into the phone for about 10 seconds, and I could hear her kitchen in the background. The same clock that's been on the wall since I was a kid, the one that ticks louder than it should. She said, "I think I made her worse by making it easy." Then she said, "I've known for about 2 years. I found a credit card statement at her house that didn't match anything she told me. I should have said something. I didn't because saying something meant admitting." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Then she asked if she could see Jalen. That was her choice. Not protecting Michelle. Not managing the situation. She chose the grandson. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet phone call on a Wednesday morning, but it rearranged the entire family. Curtis had suggested a family meeting before all of this. Neutral location. Me, Curtis, Jalen, Lorraine, and Michelle. A diner with vinyl booths and coffee that comes in. Those heavy ceramic mugs that never fully get clean. Michelle came. I'll give her that. She sat in the booth with her arms crossed and her jaw set. She looked smaller than I remembered, which might have been the booth, or might have been the context. Jalen didn't present the spreadsheet. He presented his journal, his own file, the one he built for 2 years inside her house while she slept. He opened the composition notebook and he read entries out loud. Dates and quotes. Things Michelle had said about every person at that table to him in private, thinking he'd never repeat them. What she said about Lorraine's cooking to get sympathy. What she said about Curtis being worthless to keep Jalen from asking questions. What she said about me. Your uncle thinks he's better than us because he has a savings account. He's not better. He's just scared to spend. Jalen's voice didn't shake. His hands did. He held the notebook with both hands, his fingers white at the knuckles, and he read steadily, like a student giving a report on something that happened to someone else. Except it happened to him, and everyone in the room knew it. Michelle listened for about 4 minutes. Then she stood up and said, "This is ridiculous. You're all ganging up on me." She looked at Jalen. "When Curtis gets tired of you, don't come home." Jalen closed the notebook. He said, "I'm already home." Michelle left. The bell on the diner door rang once. Lorraine was crying silently into a napkin. Curtis was looking at the table. I was holding my coffee mug, and it was empty and had been empty for 20 minutes, and I was holding it because I didn't know what to do with my hands. Without the money flowing in, Michelle couldn't cover the mortgage she was already behind on. The eviction that Jalen had been searching for his birth certificate over actually went through. The house she raised Jalen in, the house I helped put a down payment on 6 years ago for $1,500 that's on the spreadsheet in green, because she counted it as paid, it went to the bank. She moved in with a coworker from the dental office. I drove past the house once, about 3 weeks after. The lawn was already starting to go. Dandelions in the front walk, a lockbox on the door, a realtor sign leaning in the yard like it was tired of standing. Curtis filed for a formal custody acknowledgement, not to take anything from Michelle. Jalen was 21, so it wasn't about custody in the traditional sense. It was about lives with his father. The filing went through without contest because Michelle didn't show up to the hearing. The clerk called her name twice in the hallway outside the courtroom. Silence both times. Jalen told me later that Curtis sat in the courtroom hallway afterward and didn't say anything for about 5 minutes. Just sat on a wooden bench with his hands on his knees. Jalen sat next to him. The hallway smelled like floor wax and old coffee from a vending machine near the elevators. Neither of them spoke. Then Curtis said, "You want to get lunch?" And Jalen said, "Yeah." That was the whole moment. 8 years of separation resolved in a hallway. A silence and a question about lunch. I got Jalen's letter in the mail about a week after the diner. 3 handwritten pages in a plain white envelope with no return address. Just my name and apartment number in careful block letters. He apologized for every emergency that used his name. He listed everyone he knew about, numbered, going back to 2018. Some I recognized, some I'd forgotten. Some I didn't know about because they'd been aimed at other family members, using the same script with different dollar amounts. The handwriting got smaller near the bottom of the second page, like he was running out of room or running out of courage, or maybe both at the same time. There were 2 places where the ink was slightly smudged, and I spent longer than I should have looking at those smudges, trying to decide if they were from his hand dragging across the page or something else. The line I keep coming back to is the one I already told you. "I thought you stopped coming around because of me." She let me believe that. He also wrote something near the end that I think about at odd times. While driving, while standing in line at the grocery store, while lying in bed at 2 a.m. when it's quiet and the phone is dark and the fan is clicking. He wrote, "I started the journal because I didn't want to become someone who doesn't notice." She didn't notice what she was doing to people, or she noticed and did it anyway. Either way, I didn't want that. I wanted to see things clearly, even when seeing clearly meant seeing my own mother clearly. And I want you to know that was the hardest part. That letter is on my fridge now. A pizza place magnet right next to the electric bill and a coupon for oil changes that expired 2 months ago. I'm not going to frame it. I'm not going to throw it away. It just lives there in the kitchen where the light hits it in the morning when I'm making coffee. 2 months after everything, on a Saturday afternoon with nothing particular happening, I stopped at a hardware store because I needed washers for a leaking faucet in my bathroom. Aisle 7. I turned the corner with a plastic bag of washers in my hand, and there they were, Curtis and Jalen, standing in front of the power tool display. Jalen was holding a Milwaukee drill, turning it over in his hands, checking the weight and the grip. The way you check a tool when you've recently learned that the weight matters. Curtis was pointing at a DeWalt on the shelf and saying something about torque that I couldn't quite hear from 20 feet away. Jalen shook his head. Curtis pointed again, more emphatically. Jalen said something back, and Curtis put his hands up in the universal gesture of, "Fine, your money, your choice." They didn't see me. I stood at the end of the aisle, holding my bag of washers and watching a father and son argue about drill brands. The kind of argument that doesn't matter at all. The kind that means everything is fine. The kind that means the people having it have enough ordinary time together that they can waste some of it on DeWalt versus Milwaukee. The fluorescent lights were buzzing overhead. Someone in the next aisle was asking an employee about lumber prices, and the store smelled like sawdust and rubber and machine oil. I stood there for about a minute, maybe longer, and I felt something I don't have a clean word for. Not happiness, not sadness, something in the middle. Something that has to do with watching 2 people find each other after someone spent years making sure they couldn't. Then I walked to the register, paid for my washers, and drove home. Curtis was wrong about the drill, but that's not the kind of wrong that costs you your son. What about you? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with a family member, knowing it would change everything? Or have you seen someone else deal with this kind of deception? I'd really like to hear what you think down in the comments.